Before I acted like everything was fine, I was drowning. Now everything has changed. Stoicism. Before I pretended I was fine, I was quietly drowning. There are moments in life when the world still looks at you and sees strength. You move through rooms with practiced composure. You respond to messages with efficiency, speak with calm cadence, carry responsibilities that no one else would dare touch. People look at you and say, "You're handling everything so well." And you nod, because that is the role you've learned to play. But beneath that appearance, something quieter and far more dangerous is unfolding. Before I ever admitted the truth, I was quietly drowning, not in dramatic collapse, not in public crisis, but in the kind of subtle inner erosion that only reveals itself when the noise fades, the moment the door closes, the moment the phone stops ringing, the moment you exhale. That is when the real weight appears. That is when you feel how deep the water has risen inside you. You wake up tired, but you call it routine. You struggle to focus, but you blame distraction. You feel your chest tighten for reasons you can't name, but you dismiss it as stress. You tell yourself it will pass, because it always has. You tell others you're fine, because that's what they expect. And slowly, so slowly you don't even notice, you begin to lose the ability to identify the exact moment when pretending became your way of surviving. You can function, smile, serve, and still be sinking. No one teaches you how to hold that contradiction, how to look stable on the outside while everything inside you is dripping, flooding, cracking in places you don't dare examine. You become good at managing impressions. You become excellent at disguising exhaustion. You learn to greet people with warmth, even when your inner world feels cold. You master the art of appearing composed while your soul quietly whispers, "I can't keep this up much longer." The truth is, most people never drown in public. They drown internally, in silence and performance, in the invisible pressure to keep moving as if nothing is wrong. And the more capable you are, the easier it is to hide it. The world loves your strength, your reliability, your steadiness. It rarely asks what it costs. For a long time, I didn't ask either. I kept telling myself that the heaviness would disappear if I just worked harder, slept more, prayed more, planned better. I convinced myself that collapsing was not an option, that admitting struggle would somehow undo everything I had built. So I tightened the mask. I pushed through. I ignored the signs. I pretended stillness while chaos pulled at the edges of my mind. And slowly, I forgot what genuine peace felt like. I forgot what it meant to breathe without urgency. I forgot how to sit in silence without feeling hunted by my own thoughts. I forgot how to rest without shame. I forgot how to exist without performing. That is what drowning feels like. Not a sudden plunge into darkness, but a gradual descent into numbness. And then one day, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. How long can I keep pretending? Because pretending was costing me more than telling the truth ever could. I realized that the version of strength I had built was brittle. It cracked under pressure. It demanded constant effort to maintain. It offered no refuge. It held no wisdom. It protected everyone except the person who needed help the most, me. So I did something I had never allowed myself to do. I stopped performing calmness, and I started seeking clarity. This is where Stoicism entered my life, not as an escape, not as a way to shut down my emotions, but as an internal rescue, a path to rebuild myself from the inside out. Stoicism did not tell me to ignore my suffering. It taught me how to interpret it. It showed me that I wasn't drowning because life was merciless. I was drowning because I had never learned how to observe my inner chaos without becoming it. I had never learned how to separate what was happening around me from what was happening within me. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Those words became a hand reaching into the water, not to pull me out instantly, but to show me where the surface was. Stoicism taught me the difference between pain and panic, between pressure and collapse, between feeling overwhelmed and being overtaken. It showed me that clarity is not found by rearranging the world, but by reorganizing the mind. And suddenly, the drowning stopped feeling inevitable. I began to understand that the cycle could break, not through avoidance, not through distraction, not through pretending that everything was fine, but through the deliberate, disciplined act of noticing, observing, choosing, responding. That is the rescue. Not the elimination of storms, but the construction of an inner anchor that holds no matter how violently the waves rise. This video is an invitation into that journey. A journey from silent suffering to conscious strength, from internal chaos to emotional clarity, from pretending everything is fine to actually building a life where you no longer need to pretend. If you've been carrying your pain quietly, if you've been functioning while sinking, if you've been drowning behind a composed exterior, I want to show you that there is another way, a way to remain standing without collapsing, a way to walk through storms without absorbing them, a way to feel deeply without being controlled by what you feel, a way to stay present, steady, anchored. Today, we begin. The lie we tell when we say, "I'm fine." It's a phrase that rolls off the tongue with practiced ease. I'm fine. We say it in hallways, on phone calls, at family dinners, and in church pews. But how often is it true? And how often is it a mask one we've worn for so long we've forgotten what our real face looks like underneath? I'm fine is the lie we've baptized in politeness, professionalism, and pride. It's the bandage we slap over wounds we're too afraid to name. Not because we're dishonest people, but because somewhere along the way, we were taught that voicing weakness is weakness, that suffering in silence is strength, that if we acknowledge the storm inside, we give it too much power, so we keep quiet. We smile, we say we're fine, but inside, we're drowning. There's a peculiar kind of exhaustion that comes from pretending to be okay when your soul is not. It's the emotional labor of holding back tears during work meetings, of laughing when you feel hollow, of being reliable for everyone else while secretly collapsing on the inside. And we justify it. I don't want to burden anyone. They wouldn't understand. I'll deal with it later. But later rarely comes. Instead, the pressure builds silently. And that's where isolation grows. The tragedy is not just the pain we carry, but the distance it creates. We begin to believe we are the only ones fighting this invisible war, that no one else feels what we feel. That something must be wrong with us for struggling so deeply while everyone else seems to be thriving. So we pull back, smile wider, numb faster. This emotional mask becomes so heavy, yet so familiar, that removing it feels more terrifying than keeping it on. But what if the truth is that everyone is wearing one? What if behind every "I'm fine" is a storm waiting to be acknowledged? What if the real strength isn't found in holding it all together, but in being honest when we're falling apart? This is where the ancient wisdom of Stoicism collides with our modern emotional landscape. Too often, Stoicism is misunderstood as the art of suppression, of burying feelings and pretending they don't exist. But the real Stoic, like Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, never denied pain. They faced it, looked it in the eye, and refused to let it own them. True Stoicism is not pretending to be fine. It is becoming radically honest about what is, so we can change what will be. To say, "I'm not okay," isn't weakness. It's the beginning of wisdom. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." But what happens when our imagination has been shaped by years of hiding? What if the fiction we've created around our strength is actually our greatest vulnerability? This is where healing begins, not with grand revelations, but with whispered truths, with one moment of honesty. with one courageous decision to stop lying about being fine. So here is your challenge. Tonight, before sleep, look in the mirror and ask yourself, not with judgment, but with quiet compassion, am I really fine? Write down the answer, even if it scares you. And then, in the stillness, whisper this short prayer. God, I don't want to pretend anymore. I want to heal. Give me the strength to face the truth and the grace to not face it alone. Now breathe. We are only getting started. Let your mind be still. Let your heart stay open. And now, let's move to the next truth. Calm is not a performance. It's an inner shift. There's a version of calm that looks impressive, polished, and picture-perfect. It sits in meditation postures. It smiles politely during arguments. It posts quotes about peace while chaos brews just behind the screen. This calm photographs well, but it doesn't last. Because it's not rooted, it's performed. And performance always breaks under pressure. You can hold your breath for a while. You can clench your jaw and smile through the storm. But when the real waves hit, when your coworker humiliates you in front of a team, when your partner says something that reopens an old wound, when someone online drags your name through the mud, fake calm crumbles. And in its place, resentment, rage, or collapse. Real calm isn't silent aggression. It's not numbing out. It's not passively taking hits. It's an inner shift of strength, so quiet the world doesn't notice, but so powerful, it holds your soul together when everything around you is trying to tear it apart. This is the calm the Stoics trained for. Not the kind that denies emotion, but the kind that commands it. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wrote privately to himself, reminding his own mind that no matter what others do, his response was still his responsibility. That's not performance. That's discipline. Calm, in the Stoic sense, is not passive stillness. It's active awareness. It's the decision, made over and over again, not to surrender your peace to things you can't control. And it doesn't just show up when you need it. It's built in advance, quietly, daily, internally. Imagine this. You're in a meeting. Deadlines are tight. Tensions are high. Someone snaps at you, unjustly. Your old habit? Fight back or shut down. But today, something feels different. You pause. You breathe. You observe the emotion rise, like a wave. But instead of reacting, you respond. Not with silence that suppresses, but with clarity that chooses. This isn't passivity. It's power. Now picture this. Your partner says something careless. You feel it sting. Your stomach tightens. Your instinct is to defend, accuse, or punish. But something stronger rises in you. The calm you practiced yesterday when journaling. The breath work you did this morning. The truth you whispered last night. I am not my reaction. I am what I choose next. This is the new kind of calm. Not the calm that fears conflict, but the calm that isn't controlled by it. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This is not theory. It's blueprint. And in a culture that celebrates outrage, that monetizes anxiety, that glorifies speed and aggression, choosing calm is rebellion, a sacred one. So how do we build it? Start by preparing, not reacting. Create small spaces in your day where stillness is the goal. A few deep breaths before a meeting. A pause before you reply to that message. A whispered reminder in the mirror. I will not give the outside world the power to decide my state of being. Then reflect. Journal one question tonight. What usually steals my calm? And what am I willing to stop surrendering to? And before you sleep, whisper this prayer not for show, not for likes, but for your own inner training. Teach me, Lord, to breathe before I break, to pause before I punish, to be still not because I'm suppressing, but because I'm learning to lead from the inside out. This is the beginning of unshakable composure, not the performance of peace, but the practice of it. Now, let your mind settle a little deeper. Let your soul take one more breath, because what's coming next will challenge what you think power really looks like. The hidden cost of emotional drowning. You don't notice it all at once. The cost of drowning inside doesn't always look like a crisis. It often looks like competence, a well-dressed professional, a committed partner, a functioning adult. But underneath it all, there's a silent, ongoing collapse. The kind that doesn't scream for help because it doesn't think it deserves any. That's how emotional drowning works. It keeps you floating just enough to make sure no one notices how far beneath the surface your soul has already sunk. It starts with subtle symptoms. You stop sleeping well. You become easily irritated by things that used to pass unnoticed. You begin to cancel plans, not because you're busy, but because the thought of having to smile through another shallow conversation feels like emotional suffocation. You go to work. You reply to emails. You laugh at the right moments. But something sacred in you feels missing. Disconnected, numb, and the worst part? You're so used to this silent storm that it starts to feel normal. You convince yourself it's just a season, that it will pass. You call it stress, fatigue, maybe even burnout. But what you don't name is this: you're emotionally drowning. Not from the weight of one crisis, but from the slow accumulation of neglected emotions, unspoken grief, unprocessed pain, and unrealistic expectations, all held tightly under the surface while you pretend everything's okay. And here's the hidden cost. Every moment you spend pretending drains the part of you that could be healing. The energy you use to hold it together is the energy you're not using to recover. The silence you protect is the silence that isolates you. And the longer you go on like this, the harder it becomes to even remember what real peace feels like. This is where the Stoic lens offers something radical, not cold detachment, as some misunderstand it, but a piercing clarity. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress your emotions. It calls you to examine them, to sit with them, to ask, is this pain necessary? Or am I feeding it with fear, denial, and false expectations? Because much of our suffering, though real in sensation, is self-inflicted in origin. Not because we're weak, but because we've been conditioned to perform strength instead of cultivating it. We're taught to equate vulnerability with failure and exhaustion with success. But the Stoics point us toward another truth. Unexamined suffering becomes internal tyranny, and the worst tyrant is the one you defend in silence. You may not be able to control everything that hurts you, but you can stop letting the illusion of control hurt you even more. You can stop believing that holding it all in makes you noble. You can stop fearing that if you let yourself fall apart, you'll never be able to come back together. Because maybe, just maybe, it's not about falling apart, but about finally letting go of what's been falsely holding you together. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not a denial of reality. It's a recalibration. A call to shift from reaction to reflection. From drowning in chaos to discerning its cause. From being ruled by feelings to respectfully listening to them. Then deciding, calmly and with conviction, what deserves your energy. Ask yourself this: who benefits from you pretending you're fine? The world? Maybe. But you don't. Not in the long run. Because the longer you mask your suffering, the more distant your true self becomes. And healing can't find you if the version of you showing up every day is just a carefully curated shell. So stop. Breathe. Be honest. Are you okay? Or are you quietly drowning under the weight of your own silence? The answer doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And becoming fully human, flawed, wounded, yet still standing, is exactly where strength begins. Let this moment be your surface. Rise, not to impress. but to reclaim. To say, I no longer owe the world the performance of peace. I choose the pursuit of it instead. Now let your heart be still as we go deeper, replacing panic with perception. You feel it before you name it. The surge in your chest, the tightening in your throat, the irrational thoughts rushing in faster than your breath can keep up. Panic doesn't always arrive as a dramatic breakdown. It sneaks in as a reflex. A sudden fear, a spiral of what-ifs, a bodily reaction that hijacks your clarity before your mind has time to anchor. And here's the truth. Panic is often not about the event itself. It's about the story we tell ourselves about the event. A story so automatic, so habitual, that it plays like background noise we've long stopped noticing. But what if that story could be interrupted not by force, but by philosophy? Not by suppressing emotion, but by retraining perception. This is where Stoicism becomes not just a worldview, but a rescue plan. Marcus Aurelius didn't write for perfect days. He wrote in the midst of war, plague, political tension, and personal grief. And in those pages, he left a quiet key. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That's not denial, that's sovereignty. To replace panic with perception, you must reclaim the sacred space between stimulus and response. The Stoics called this prohairesis the faculty of choice. That space is where your real strength lives. It's not about how loud the world is. It's about how grounded you are when it gets loud. Here's the first practice. Pause. Before the reply, before the outburst, before the mental spiral, pause. Not forever. Just long enough to ask, is this reaction helping or harming me? In that one question, you begin to shift from instinct to insight, from compulsion to clarity. Second practice, describe without dramatizing. I am facing a delay, not everything is falling apart. This person disagrees with me. Not they're trying to ruin my peace. The words you use to label discomfort become the lens through which you feel it. The Stoic mindset demands precision, not for performance, but for freedom. Because vague panic thrives where truth is absent. Third practice, return to your breath. This sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. In every breath lies the opportunity to reset, to reconnect with the present instead of projecting into catastrophe. When you anchor in your breath, you anchor in what you can control, and from that place, you make wiser decisions. Fourth, journal your triggers. Seneca advised rehearsing adversity in advance, not to become pessimistic, but to become prepared. Write out your recurring emotional storms. What sets them off? What's the first thought? What's the usual outcome? In tracking your patterns, you begin to reclaim authorship over them. You stop being the victim of surprise and start becoming the strategist of response. Let's be clear, replacing panic with perception doesn't mean you'll never feel overwhelmed. It means you'll start recognizing that overwhelm doesn't have to own you. Emotions are messengers, not dictators. And Stoicism teaches you to listen without obeying, to observe without absorbing, to feel without fragmenting. One of the most powerful Stoic practices is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Visualize challenges before they arrive, not with dread, but with calm readiness. Ask, if this happens, how would the best version of me respond? This visualization becomes your rehearsal. And when the moment comes, you no longer react, you recall. You don't panic, you pivot. And now, hear this truth. Your power is not in controlling life's chaos. Your power is in controlling your posture in the middle of it. When something goes wrong, your instinct might be to rush, to solve, to shout, to spiral. But the Stoic within you is whispering, pause, observe, choose. That whisper is the space between the event and your reaction. That space is your battlefield. your sanctuary, your liberation. Because perception, trained daily, becomes peace. And peace, real peace, isn't the absence of trouble. It's the presence of unshakable clarity within it. Now let's go even deeper to what it means to live with that clarity daily, deliberately, and quietly. Training the mind to withstand the storm. The mind, when left untrained, becomes the greatest source of suffering. Not because it is weak, but because it is undisciplined. And in today's overstimulated world, that undisciplined mind is constantly being pulled, poked, and prodded by every notification, opinion, headline, and fear. We wake up and check the weather, but not the climate of our soul. We scroll through chaos before we even sit with ourselves. We run into battle without sharpening the blade of the mind. And then we wonder why we're exhausted by noon. The storm isn't always outside. Most of the time, it's internal. That's why the Stoics didn't just reflect, they trained. Marcus Aurelius was not merely writing thoughts into the void. His meditations were not meant for others. They were daily discipline, mental training, quiet rehearsal for emotional resistance. He understood what modern life forgets. The mind must be prepared before the storm arrives, not during it. And in that preparation, Stoicism offers us three powerful anchors. 1. Premeditatio malorum, the mental rehearsal of adversity. This is not pessimism. This is preparation with purpose. The practice is simple. Envision potential hardships not to create anxiety, but to create resilience. What if the meeting fails? What if the answer is no? What if I am misunderstood, delayed, betrayed? Now ask, what would the disciplined version of me do then? This is how you transform fear into strategy. When you face the imagined storm with composure, you equip yourself to face the real one with clarity. You stop being surprised. You become stable. 2. Journaling, the dialogue that strengthens the mind. The Stoics didn't scroll. They sat with themselves. They wrote not to impress, but to inspect. Journaling is not emotional dumping. It's cognitive training. You clarify what matters. You expose distortions. You confront illusions. Seneca wrote, "When the light has been taken away, and my wife has fallen silent, I examine the whole of my day." You don't need a perfect journal. You need a regular one. Ask yourself, what triggered me today? What did I fear? What did I exaggerate? Where did I act beneath my values? With each answer, you are not merely venting. You are sculpting your soul. You are strengthening the mental muscles that will keep you grounded when the emotional winds rise. 3. Value alignment, your inner compass and outer chaos. The untrained mind is reactive. The trained mind is rooted in values. The Stoics didn't aim for happiness. They aimed for eudaimonia, life of purpose, excellence, and alignment. When your values are clear, your decisions become simple even if they are not easy. Ask, is this action aligned with courage or comfort, with virtue or vanity, with long-term growth or short-term relief? When your day begins with these questions, you don't get lost in distractions. You remain steady in direction, even when storms pull at your emotions. Now let's talk about the power of quiet routines. In a world addicted to urgency, the Stoic seeks stillness. Not silence for silence's sake, but rhythm for the soul. Quiet habits fortify clarity. A slow morning where your phone sleeps while your mind wakes. A walk without noise, just footsteps and breath. A sentence written, not posted. A prayer whispered, not shouted. A moment to think before reacting. These aren't luxuries. These are weapons. Because the mind cannot train in chaos what it hasn't rehearsed in quiet. And here's the truth. You don't rise to the level of your potential in a crisis. You fall to the level of your training. If you haven't trained your perception, your emotions will lead. If you haven't anchored in your values, the storm will decide for you. If you haven't quieted your mind in stillness, You will scream internally in stress. But when you've trained, truly trained, your calm becomes unshakable. And that calm isn't a performance. It's not robotic indifference. It's not suppression. It's power in its quietest form. It's the soul saying, I was prepared for this moment. I've already met it in my mind. Now I meet it in life. So train every day in silence, in writing, in principle, because storms are coming always. But the Stoic doesn't fear the storm. The Stoic is the storm contained, composed, and clear. Let's now move into the next level of clarity, what it means to protect your peace in a chaotic world. When you feel too much and don't know what to do with it, some people are not fragile, just deep. They feel everything, not because they're weak, but because they're open. A single word can sting for hours. A passing look can spark an entire narrative. A silence can echo louder than a scream. You care, you sense, you internalize. But what happens when you don't know where to place all of it? You go silent, hoping no one sees the flood behind your calm voice. You isolate, ashamed of emotions you can't seem to explain. You try to snap out of it, as if that's ever worked. You look fine to everyone except to the mirror. This is not dramatization. It's the lived reality of the emotionally attuned. And if you've ever felt like your heart is too loud, this part is for you. Enter Stoicism, not to numb you, but to anchor you. The modern misunderstanding of Stoicism says, feel nothing. Harden up, detach. But the wisdom of the real Stoics says something far more nuanced. Feel, but do not be ruled. Let's be clear, a Stoic does not reject emotion. Marcus Aurelius wept. Epictetus taught about grief. Seneca wrote about pain. But they also understood this. If you do not give your emotions structure, they will give you chaos. Here's what that structure looks like. 1. A calm soul can still cry, but chooses when and how feeling is not weakness. But being owned by your feelings is a silent form of slavery. Imagine you're standing in the rain. Emotion is the rain. You cannot stop it. But the Stoic chooses whether to dance in it, walk through it, or seek cover. It's not denial, it's agency. You don't let emotion hijack your speech, your actions, your choices. You let it move through you, not as an intruder, but as a guest who knows when to leave. Ask yourself, is this feeling true or just loud? Does this emotion align with who I want to be? Am I reacting or responding? This practice alone can save friendships, marriages, reputations, and peace of mind. 2. Empathy needs a gate, not a wall. Sensitive people often feel they must shut down to survive. But suppression is not strength. It's implosion on delay. What you need isn't a wall. It's a gate, something that allows you to sense the world without drowning in it. This is where Stoic structure comes in. Boundaries. Not everyone gets access to your interior world. Solitude. Time alone is not escapism, it's emotional detox. Filtering. Just because someone feels strongly doesn't mean they are right. Discernment. Ask, is this my emotion or someone else's that I absorbed? When you name these boundaries, you don't lose your empathy. You protect it. 3. Emotional honesty without emotional slavery. You can say, I'm sad, without collapsing into it. You can admit, this hurts, without becoming bitterness. You can confess, I feel anxious, and still walk into the meeting, the moment, the relationship with presence. This is the Stoic shift. Not indifference, but self-command. Imagine a river. Your emotions are the current. Stoicism is the riverbank solid, shaped by principle, guiding the water forward. If you remove the banks, the water floods. But with structure, it flows strong, beautiful, and clear. That's what Stoicism gives you. Form, flow, focus. You become a person who feels deeply but responds wisely. And in that balance, you find something rare. Peace that does not demand the world to change. Peace that knows how to hold joy and grief in the same breath. Peace that listens to the heart, but answers with the mind. 4. Practical anchor for the empathic mind. Here's one practice you can begin tonight. Before bed, take 5 minutes and write down one emotion you felt strongly today, the moment that triggered it, what it taught you, whether you acted on it or let it pass. This is not therapy. It's training. It's owning your interior landscape. Over time, you'll notice something powerful. You still feel, but you're no longer drowned. You still care, but you're no longer consumed. You still break sometimes, but you know how to rebuild calmly, consciously, completely. This is the Stoic empath, aware, awake, and anchored. Now, let's move forward into something even deeper. How silence is not absence, but a sacred strategy for clarity. What acting fine becomes when it's rooted in integrity. We've been taught that acting fine means lying. That if you smile when you're not okay, you're wearing a mask. That if you keep showing up while your soul feels bruised, you're hiding something. That if you keep your composure when the storm hits, you're faking strength. But what if that's not true? What if acting fine isn't a performance, but a posture of becoming? What if choosing to walk in strength, even before you feel it, can create the very strength your soul needs? This is the Stoic paradox. You don't fake peace. You choose it, again and again, until it shapes you from the inside out. This is not denial. This is dignity. And it might be the highest form of self-respect a human being can practice. 1. The integrity of presence. Let's redefine what it means to act fine. It doesn't mean ignoring your pain. It means refusing to let your pain become your identity. It doesn't mean suppressing your grief. It means honoring it without handing it the steering wheel. When Marcus Aurelius journaled his thoughts at night, do you think he always felt stoic? No. He became stoic by how he chose to walk through the shadows of his own mind. When you stand tall in a broken moment, you're not deceiving the world. You're disciplining your spirit. That's integrity, not image. The lie is not in walking like you're okay. The lie is believing you have to collapse to be authentic. 2. The mask versus the model. There is a difference between a mask and a model. A mask hides what is. A model demonstrates what can be. When you choose to act grounded, not to impress, but to embody, you are not being fake. You are giving your nervous system a new script. You are training your inner world to follow your chosen posture. You are saying, this pain does not get to write the ending. You are declaring, my emotions do not get to dictate my ethics. You are affirming, I am still becoming, so I will walk like the person I'm becoming, not the person I feel like today. This is not pretense. It is prophetic alignment, your future self guiding your present steps. 3. Anchored behavior, even in emotional weather. There will be days when everything in you wants to unravel, but you will breathe slowly. You will stand with soft eyes and clear words. You will move with deliberateness, not despair. Why? Because this is how you train your soul to remember. You are more than what you feel. You are more than what happened to you. You are the kind of person who endures, decides, and rebuilds. Stoicism is not about faking that nothing hurts. It's about walking through what hurts without betraying who you are. This is acting fine with integrity. 4. The anchor. Walk as if you are already grounded. Here is your practice. When chaos rises, don't just think differently, walk differently. Even if your chest is tight, slow your steps. Even if your hands tremble, lower your shoulders. Even if your mind races, pause before you speak. Say to yourself, walk as if you are already grounded. Eventually, you will be. It's not magic. It's neuroplasticity. It's muscle memory. You are building a calm that doesn't depend on the weather, a clarity that isn't reactive to noise, a presence that isn't shaken by perception. This is how you embody peace before you feel peace. This is how you rehearse becoming unshakable. And with time, something shifts. You are no longer acting fine. You are walking in truth. Not because nothing hurts, but because you are stronger than what hurts. And that is where dignity is born. Not in the absence of emotion, but in the refusal to let it lead you off course. Now, let's go even deeper into the hidden power of choosing stillness, not to escape emotion, but to transform it. The power of a quiet decision that no one sees. Not every turning point makes noise. Not every victory is seen. Sometimes, the most life-altering moments happen in complete stillness, when no one is watching, no one applauds, and no spotlight is shining. Just you, your mind, your breaking point, and a quiet decision that rewires the course of your life. This is the sacred ground of Stoic transformation. Not in grand gestures, but in internal vows, invisible shifts, and the disciplined silence that follows. 1. The most powerful changes don't announce themselves. We often associate change with explosions, big moments of catharsis, tearful confessions, radical action. But real change, the kind that lasts, is usually quiet. It begins in a room with no audience. No one claps, no one even knows. It begins the moment you say, "I will no longer be ruled by this." When you set your intention not with words, but with the weight of your presence. Maybe it's the decision to stop reacting. Maybe it's the choice to forgive without closure. Maybe it's the vow to show up again and again, even if no one sees you trying. That moment matters, because that's where integrity is born. Not in what people see, but in what you choose when no one sees anything at all. 2. Internal vows. Where the battle begins and ends. A vow is not just a promise, it's a reorientation. A Stoic vow is internal architecture. You're not trying to prove something to others. You're choosing who you will be, regardless of how you feel. It might sound like, "I will not let this bitterness shape me. I will remain calm, even if chaos surrounds me. I will speak less and listen more, not to appear wise, but to become wise. I will rebuild, not because I have to, but because I can." These decisions don't need announcement. They don't beg for external validation. They become your spine. You walk differently because you decided differently. You suffer less, not because life stopped hurting, but because you stopped surrendering your peace to pain. 3. Silence as a spiritual discipline. There is a type of silence that is not repression, it is refinement. It is the kind of silence that doesn't rush to speak before understanding. It doesn't lash out. It doesn't panic. It doesn't seek pity. It simply waits, breathes, observes, decides. This is the power of stillness that Stoicism reveres, not as weakness, but as supreme command of self. You begin to realize, just because something happened doesn't mean it gets to define how you respond. Just because you feel doesn't mean you must react. Silence creates the space between the fire and your action, and that space is power. 4. Unseen healing is the most beautiful kind. No one will ever fully understand the depth of what you're healing from. They may never know the moments you almost broke, but didn't. The nights you wanted to give up, but kept going. The thoughts you had to fight just to smile. The triggers you mastered in secret. But that's okay, because you know, and the universe knows. And every quiet victory carves a stronger soul within you. You will begin to carry yourself differently, not with arrogance, but with gravity. Not with perfection, but with peace. You no longer need to broadcast your healing. You embody it. You no longer need to be loud about your strength. You live it. And this is the paradox. The more invisible your decision, the more invincible it becomes. Because what is built in silence cannot be undone by noise. So tonight, if no one understands, if no one sees the battle you're fighting, if no one claps for the growth you've chosen, know this: your quiet decision is holy ground. It is where everything begins to change. And tomorrow, you will rise not because the world noticed, but because you did. Now, take a breath, and let's go deeper into the next phase of this journey. The sacred space where stillness becomes not absence, but presence. When you stop explaining your peace, it deepens. There comes a moment in the healing process when silence becomes your ally. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of settledness. The kind of silence that no longer needs to be justified, defended, or explained. You're no longer performing for understanding. You're no longer exhausting yourself, trying to translate your boundaries into languages others may or may not respect. You simply begin to live your truth, not because it's been approved, but because it's finally aligned. This is the hidden power of Stoicism. It doesn't demand validation. It doesn't plead to be seen. It doesn't crave consensus to feel confident. The Stoic learns, slowly, quietly, that peace is not a group project. That peace, when real, stands alone, not coldly, but firmly. We live in a time where every action demands an explanation. Post your distance, and someone wants a reason. Pull back to find balance, and someone sees offense. Heal quietly, and someone imagines disloyalty. But healing is not a spectacle. The soul is not an exhibition. The Stoic teaches us to pull away from that temptation. The temptation to narrate our inner world just to make someone else feel comfortable about our growth. Because truthfully, if your peace always needs to be explained, it's not peace. It's still performance. The depth of your silence reveals the depth of your clarity. When you stop defending your choices, not out of rebellion, but out of rootedness, something incredible happens. Your spirit recalibrates. Your energy stops bleeding through 1,000 conversations, trying to justify why you're no longer who you were. And with that energy reclaimed, peace becomes sustainable. Not just a feeling, but a posture. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because improvement disrupts familiarity. Because becoming something new often looks like betrayal to those addicted to the version of you that served them. You're not foolish. You're just free. And freedom looks strange to those still tethered to external approval. Peace is not loud. It doesn't prove itself through decibels. It doesn't announce its intentions in paragraphs or permission slips. Peace simply is. It holds space. It draws a line. It offers presence without explanation. You begin to realize that the more you try to explain your peace, the more you dilute it. The more you engage in debates about your growth, the more you delay your evolution. And the more you center someone else's comfort, the more you betray your calling. So you stop. You stop writing long messages to justify why you're saying no. You stop overanalyzing the facial expressions of people who misunderstand your solitude. You stop minimizing your boundaries so they'll seem kinder or softer. You stop handing out verbal receipts for decisions that came from prayer, pain, and persistence. You just walk in peace and let it speak for itself. Because true peace doesn't have to shout. It just stands. Like a mountain that doesn't beg the sky to understand why it doesn't move. Like a soul that has stopped drowning and finally found its breath. And in that quiet breath, you feel it, the deepest form of strength. Not the strength that shows up in crowds, or on stages, or in public affirmations, but the kind that shows up in the stillness, in the sacred, unshared space, where no one claps, no one comments, no one even sees. But you know you're finally home in your own skin. That's when your peace deepens. Not because they approved, but because you no longer need them to. Now let's step further into this inner clarity. Night rituals that pulled me from the flood. There are hours of the day when the world gets quiet enough for your soul to be honest. For me, it was always at night when the noise faded, when the distractions ran out, when the masks slipped off with the sunset. That's when I started to feel the flood, the unspoken weight, the invisible bruises, the questions I avoided all day. It's no surprise that most breakdowns begin in the silence of midnight. But so can most breakthroughs? Because the flood, no matter how heavy, can become the training ground for transformation, if you know how to meet it. And I did not meet it with perfection. I met it, first, with ritual. Small, strange, quiet rituals that didn't make me feel better immediately, but anchored me slowly. Stoicism doesn't teach you to feel nothing. It teaches you to feel honestly, then respond intentionally. And that shift began for me at night. It started with journaling, not paragraphs of poetic writing, but blunt, raw fragments, just questions, just reflections, just truth. I would write like Marcus Aurelius did, not for the world, but for myself. No audience, no editing. Just, what did I carry today that wasn't mine? Did I respond from fear or from character? What pain am I labeling as personality? Where did I choose silence when truth was safer? This wasn't therapy. It was alignment. It was training my thoughts to stop running away. And when I looked them in the eye under candlelight, I realized they weren't as powerful as I had imagined. The flood was real, yes, but much of it was recycled. Loops of fear, echoes of rejection, replays of conversations where I gave too much or said too little. The night gave me a mirror, and I stopped looking away. That mirror taught me something Stoicism rarely gets credit for: compassion. Because when you're honest enough to see your flaws and still steady enough to keep showing up the next day, that's not detachment. That's love with discipline. Another ritual. I stopped ending the day with noise. No late night scrolling. No comparing. No absorbing the anxieties of the world seconds before sleep. Instead, I would sit, breathe, pray, or sometimes just ask myself, what truth did I avoid today? It was rarely comfortable, but it was always clarifying. And over time, this nightly discipline did something remarkable. It rewired my mornings. Because when you end the day with intentional reflection, you don't start the next one in chaos. You don't wake up reacting. You wake up with continuity, with consciousness, with clarity. It's easy to underestimate these rituals. They're not glamorous. No one's watching you write to yourself. No one celebrates the way you whisper forgiveness into the night. But these are the very things that keep you from drowning silently. And maybe that's what real transformation looks like. Not fireworks, but a single candle that stays lit through the storm. That was my candle. A pen, a question, a quiet room. That was my rescue. Because the world rarely teaches you to end the day well. It teaches you to collapse, to escape, to distract. But the Stoic knows the night is not the end. It is the training ground for tomorrow's clarity. So ask yourself tonight, what did you carry today that wasn't yours? And what will you finally lay down before sleep? Not with guilt, but with wisdom. Let's move now to the final chapter. 1 year later, I am still in storms, but no longer drowning. A year ago, I was performing my own rescue. Quietly, desperately. The surface of my life looked steady. I showed up. I smiled. I gave what I had. But beneath it all, I was gasping. Drowning beneath responsibilities I didn't know how to release. Emotions I hadn't yet named, and expectations I never questioned, but always tried to meet. And I told myself, it's just a season. But seasons don't end by themselves. Some must be ended intentionally. It wasn't one event that changed everything. It was a series of choices, almost invisible from the outside. Choosing stillness instead of speed. Choosing silence over performance. Choosing to be misunderstood rather than over-explain my boundaries, choosing to journal instead of numb, choosing not to respond right away when provoked, choosing every day to come back to what I knew was true, even when it didn't feel true yet. That's what no one tells you about transformation. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in the quiet consistency of a mind being retrained. 1 year later, storms still come. The bills haven't vanished. Deadlines still loom. People still disappoint. The world still throws noise and pressure at every waking hour. But something fundamental shifted. I don't drown anymore, because I no longer look at the storm as something to fight. I look at it as something to understand. I am not constantly trying to fix the chaos anymore. I observe it, I respect it, but I don't become it. I've learned the truth behind the Stoic idea that the external world will never be fully yours to control, but the internal world is entirely your responsibility. My peace no longer depends on things going well. My identity no longer depends on being seen or praised. My purpose no longer depends on always getting it right. I've learned how to be still, not because life got easier, but because I stopped needing life to be easy in order to remain grounded. Sometimes people ask, "What changed? You seem different." And I smile, not because everything is better, but because I am better. Not fixed, but fortified. Not numb, but anchored. I still feel deeply. I still wrestle with uncertainty. But I no longer try to escape it. I greet it with structure. I listen with discernment. I move slower, but more decisively. You see, drowning didn't begin with chaos. It began with self-neglect. I silenced myself to stay strong for others. I minimized my pain to keep the peace. I abandoned reflection in the name of productivity. I wore strength like a costume instead of cultivating it through practice. And so recovery didn't look like a dramatic life overhaul. It looked like returning to my inner home, sweeping the floors of thought, opening the windows of perspective, building walls where boundaries were needed. The same house, a different spirit. I want you to understand, if you're still in the middle of your storm, it doesn't mean you failed. Storms are part of life. But what you build within will determine whether those storms define you or refine you. And that's the legacy of Stoicism in my life. Not a cold distance from emotion, but a trained relationship with it. Not a fake calm, but a steady resolve. Not the absence of struggle, but the refusal to collapse under it. 1 year later, the waves still rise, but I no longer sink. And that's the miracle no one claps for, but it is the one that will carry you through every season to come. A closing confession. I'm not acting fine anymore. I'm becoming fine because I know what I carry and what I release. Everything changed, not because the world softened, but because I did. Because I stopped needing applause to validate peace. Because I realized survival doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it just looks like stillness. Breathe with me. Not the breath that rushes, but the breath that returns. Return to yourself, to the present moment, to the quiet you once feared, but now realize was where your healing always waited. No one saw the exact day the shift happened, but you did. You felt it when you stopped drowning in what wasn't yours to hold. You noticed it the first time you paused and didn't panic, when your silence wasn't numbness, but awareness. Say it softly now, not for anyone else to hear, but for your soul to recognize. I choose clarity over chaos. I am no longer drowning in things I cannot control. Stillness is not fake. It's my survival. This is not the end, but it is a new beginning, built one quiet decision at a time. You don't need to explain your journey. You just need to keep walking it. One grounded thought, one calm breath, one anchored moment at a time. Let go of the illusion that healing must look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed and sitting in silence without shame. Sometimes it's not fixing everything. It's just not being controlled by anything. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be present. Not here to impress, but to embody. Not here to rush, but to return. To truth, to values, to breath, to stillness. So tonight, as you close your eyes, ask nothing more of yourself than this: to be aware, to be kind, to be still. You are not drowning. You are learning how to float with eyes open. This is not performance. This is peace. And peace doesn't shout. It just stands. Let the noise fade. Let the day end. Let the next breath be enough. Comment below: I no longer act fine. I walk in quiet command. Subscribe for new weekly Stoic reflections and guided practices that help you build unshakable inner strength, one still decision at a time. Next video preview: the strongest person in the room is usually the quietest. Here's why.